Good morning.
Morning. Okay, I'm recording this. One of the things that Hashem said to Avraham, Avorcha v'orchecha, I'll bless those who bless you. To Rashi, offered a number of interpretations based on the Midrash. The Kohanim, there's a mitzvah of Birchas Kohanim, positive commandment, that a Kohen, when he comes upon a congregation of Jews, a minyan, he has a Torah obligation to bless them. That's Birchas Kohanim, the three brachos, and that's a doraisa, it's a Torah law. Meaning, but the obligation is only if you summon the Kohen to bless you, then he has an obligation to bless the tzibur, and that's the reason why we say Kohanim. Once you say Kohanim, they have to respond. Okay. So now the question is, do they bless us, or they are only the conduit for the blessing? The Kohanim, when they bless us, they extend their hands and they separate their fingers. So the way it's cited in Shulchan Aruch, the whole concept of separating the fingers is, it's like windows, that when they say the Birchas Kohanim, the bracha, they are only the conduit, but Hashem is the one who actually gives the bracha. When they say the words, that's how they activate the bracha, but the bracha comes from Hashem. That's what it's cited in Halacha. Okay? You take a look in the Midrash over here. The Midrash says on that pasuk, "Va'avorchem v'orchecha, Amalo osa lahamid minei b'necha shev sheborch Yisrael." What Hashem said to Avraham, there's going to be a tribe descending from you, that they will be the ones to bless Klal Yisrael. And who are they? Reshaped Levi. Levi will be the ones. Now this is important. So Avraham says there will be a shevet in the future who will bless the Jewish people, and Avraham says, and who's going to bless them? I mean, why does that blessing have special value? Jay mentioned the other day, we quoted the Gemara, Al tebichas hedyet kal beinecha, that even the ordinary person that gives you a bracha, you should not minimize the bracha, because a person who has a neshama, he has a spiritual component, don't minimize, and bracha comes from that person, don't minimize the bracha. That means every Jew, and even a goy, even a non-Jew, if he wants to give you a blessing, it has value. Don't minimize the blessing, because it may have value. But over here, Avraham says, Hashem says that there's going to be a tribe descending from you who's going to bless Klal. So that means there's something unique about them. Say, Avraham says to Hashem, and who's going to bless them? Who's going to bless them? So the Medrash answers, when they attempt to bless the Jewish people, I will bless them. It's a similar concept we said in the name of Avraham Avinu. I will bless those in advance to be blessed. So when they bless you, a blessed people are blessing you. The people who are blessed. So if you're already blessed, your bracha has another value. So the Medrash answers, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Avraham Avinu, when they're about to bless you, I will bless them, so that blessing should have value. From the Medrash, it seems to be, it's not that they're a conduit. It's not Hashem is blessing us through the Kohanim, but rather when they attempt to bless us, Hashem blesses them, and since they're blessed, their blessing, their bracha has another value. I'm just saying, from the Midrash, it seems not the way it seems from the Halacha, the way it's cited in the Halacha. At this time, in the physical world, Shevet Levi will be the ones to bless Klal Yisrael. At the end of time, but at the end of time, I will directly bless them. Ultimately, Hashem, meaning the bracha will not come through an intermediary, but rather it will be direct. But it seems to be they're blessed, and because they're blessed, therefore the bracha has value. I'm just saying, from that's the connotation of the Medrash. Not the way it seems to be from the Halacha, that they're only a pass-through, but Hashem is blessing us through the Kohanim.
Can you?
It tells us in Bava Basra, Avir Dara Malchim, that the atmosphere in Eretz Yisrael it gives a person greater relevance to Chokhmah. If you live in Eretz Yisrael, Avir Dara Machkim, the spirituality of the location allows the person to have a greater capacity for Chokhmah. Avira in Aramaic is the Avir. Avir is the air. The atmosphere is Machkim, makes you wiser. So before I mention a Gemara, so the way I understood it this way, it's cited in Medrash that every one of the 70 root nations has an archangel, and all the sustenance that comes to that nation goes through that archangel, The Jewish people have no archangel. The sustenance comes directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu to us. It doesn't go through an intermediary. The Gemara tells us at the end of Shubis, Kol ador b'chutz la'aretz kein lo eloka. If you live outside of Eretz, it's like you have no God. What do you mean you have no God? So the Maharsha, who's the commentator at the Gemara, cites the Ramban. The Ramban explains it this way. When the world was divided among the 70 root nations, every root nation has its location, and then its archangel oversees that location in the world. So if a Jew lives in that location, wherever it may be in the world, the Jew receives his sustenance, it comes through that archangel. So it's not directly, it comes through the intermediary, which is the archangel. But if you live in Eretz Yisrael, there is no intermediary, it comes directly from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, directly to the Jew. That's the meaning of the Gemara Ksubis, Kol ador b'chutz la'aretz kein lo eloka. If you live outside of Eretz Yisrael, it's like you have no God, meaning that the relationship is not the same, it's not direct, but rather goes through this intermediary, which is the archangel. That's the Ramban. The way I explained it was, Avir Dara Machkim, the closer you to the source, the greater relevance you have to clarity, to wisdom. So in Eretz Yisrael, where there is no intermediary, there is no archangel, even though the archangel is a spiritual being, but since there's no pass-through, but rather it's direct, therefore, one has greater relevance to Chokhmah than if you live outside of Eretz Yisrael. That's how I explained it. Okay? So we're saying now that the Kohen, so with the way we're explaining it, the Kohen is the pass-through. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Mevorech, the way it's cited, and the Kohen goes, the bracha comes through the Kohen. But from the Medrash, it seems to be no. Hashem blesses, when the Kohen wants to bless well, maybe that would be closer. When the Kohen wants to bless the tzibur, Hashem gives the blessing to the Kohen, and now that the Kohen is blessed, he has the ability to what? To give the bracha. But it's not, he's a conduit. He's not a conduit. Now that you're blessed, you're able to be, your bracha is able to be effective because you're a blessed person. So what I said was like this. There's a Gemara in the Dorim. The Gemara says in the Dorim that Ula was a Talmud of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan lived in Eretz Yisrael, lived in Yerushalayim, lived in another part of Eretz Yisrael too, in Tzipori, and Ula was walking with two people who came from a community in Bovel. It was called Mechuzah. Mechuzah was a community in Bovel. And they were traveling with them, and they get into an argument, and one of these people take a knife and he slits the other person's throat. These are two Jews. So the one the murderer says to Ula, who's the great rabbi, did I do a good job? So he says, maybe you should cut a little bit more. Because he was afraid that if somehow he criticized him, he'll kill him. Okay? But his conscience bothered him. He comes to Rabbi Yochanan and he says, maybe I was somehow an accomplice to murder. Because this man slit his throat. And when he asked me, did I do a good job? I said, a little bit more. So Rabbi Yochanan says, you don't have to worry about it. Once he slit his throat, he was considered dead. So a little bit more made no difference. You didn't contribute to his death. Okay? But Rabbi Yochanan says, but I'm amazed. What I'm amazed is, it says in the Tochacha that when the Jews go to Golus, into exile, when you go into exile, you can have an enraged heart. You can have an enraged heart, and because of that, you'll have a lesser capacity to tolerate one another. you'll have that level of rage within you. So I understand it's possible that a Jew, because this is part of the curse of the Golus, that's an outgrowth, a consequence of the labor agos, from the word rogis. If you have a level of anger at that level, it's could do it. You can do it. So Ula says to his Rebbe, to Rabbi Yochanan, we didn't cross the Jordan yet. We were still on the other side of the Jordan. We were still in Golus, in the location of Golus. That's the reason why it happened. But if it would have been Eretz Yisrael, where there is no lever agos, because it says Nosai Lochem Shom. When you're there, you have the lever agos. In Eretz Yisrael, there's no lever agos. You don't have that. So I explained that's the concept of Avir Aramachkim. When you're in Eretz Yisrael, where you don't have that level of distraction, this agitation, you're able to have clarity. But when you're in Golus, when you have this agitation, because you're in Golus, it's a whole different location of existence. You have that agitation, you can lose it, even to this degree that one Jew could kill another Jew. But if you have that agitation, it undermines your focus. If it interferes with your focus, you don't have that level of clarity. But in Eretz Yisrael, that you don't have this agitation, you don't have that distraction, therefore you have a greater level of clarity. That's the way I explained the Gemara, why in Eretz Yisrael, Avir Aramachim, and in Chutz La'aretz, it's outside of Eretz Yisrael, we don't have that same level of clarity. See, the way I would understand without this, I'd say, Eretz Yisrael, which is Eretz HaKadosh, based on the Rambam, you have a greater siyata d'shmayo, you have a greater level of divine assistance, therefore you see things more clearly. Chutz La'aretz, you don't have it. That's the simple understanding. But from here we see that outside of Eretz Yisrael, there's a lever agos. That's part of the curse of Golus. You will have that agitated heart, that anger. You have that capacity to reach a level of rage. And because you have that rage, therefore that distracts from clarity. Vayira Hashem el Avram. Hashem appears to Avram. Vayomer l'zarcha etes na'or tzazos. To your progeny, I will give this land. Before he left, Hashem says, Lech Lecha, it's in your best interest. Go for yourself. And what's going to be your interest? Right now, you have no children. There you will have children. Right now, you have no land. There you will have a land. Now you have no renown. There you will have renown. Okay? So Hashem now appears to him, says, so what is he telling him? You're going to have progeny. Because he said, I will give you this land to your children. Even Shem Mizbeach Lashem Nirelov. It says he built a Mizbeach Lashem Nirelov, to Hashem who had appeared to him. So now the interesting Rashi. By even Shem Mizbeach, why did he build a Mizbeach? Al Besuras Hazera Al Besuras Eretz Yisrael. According to Medrash. Because he was just informed the good tiding, he's going to have children, and the land is going to be his. That's the way Rashi explains. There's an Orach Chaim HaKadosh over here explains that even though he was informed he's going to have children, and even though he was informed that the land is going to be his and his children's, why did he build a Mizbeach? He built a Mizbeach to acknowledge that he merited to have this communication. L'Hashem Anir Elov. He built the Mizbeach because Hashem appeared to him. That's what Orach Chaim HaKadosh learns this pasuk. I'll give you the similar, something has a semblance in this. We had mentioned that on Sukkot, we bring 70 oxen, 70 bulls, which represent the 70 nations of the world. On Shmini Atzeres, it's Parechod. Parechod, one that represents Klal Yisrael. So the Midrash says, Asuli Misutsu the Kitano. Moshel Me'adovadom, what is it now? Which to? A king makes a banquet and he invites everybody to come, but his most intimate friend, he has no privacy. And he's giving the bracha to all these other people. So the intimate friend says to the king, he says, and what about myself? He says, once I deal with all these people, we're going to have a private meal. The two of us, we're going to have an intimate meal. That's the Medrash. That's parechot. On Shmini Atzis parechot. During the 7 days, it's shivim porim. So, but the Medrash uses the term asu imi suda ketano. Make for me just a small meal, suda ketano, no banquet, parechot. So the Sfas Emes explains what is it analogous to. You have country bumpkins, and they're invited to the inaugural ball of the king. He's being installed as the king. And what goes through their minds? There's going to be an unlimited amount of wine and food. That's what they see. But they don't have an appreciation that the king is going to be there and he's going to be available for them to see him and to interact with him at some level. That focus is the what, the trough, the feedback. But the more sophisticated person, when he hears about the banquet, it's not the food. It's only the context through which you'll be able to meet the king. Asu misuda kitano, Hashem says, make for me just a small meal, meaning the meal is not what we're talking about. That's only the setting for us to meet. Like two people get together, say, let's get together over a cup of coffee. It's not the coffee. You need a setting for you to get together. That's asu misuda kitano. Hashem says, initially, you go, you can have children, you can have a land. And it's the ultimate. He has no children, he has no land. He's a man without a country. Hashem comes and appears to him. And why does he build the Mizbeach? Hashem and Eidov. Regardless, as much as the children are important, the land is important, but this supersedes it all. He built the Mizbeach to acknowledge that he merited that Hashem should what? Should communicate with him. That he should have the nevuah, he should have the prophecy at this moment. That's how the Avraham Avinu explains this. Ramchal writes, the Ramchal writes that a Navi, prophets, sometimes one prophet could prophesies one time in his lifetime, just once. And a prophecy could be for a nanosecond. That's it. Or prophecy could be for longer, one time but longer, or prophecy be ongoing. Hashem communicates with that Navi multiple times, like you have Yeshaya, Navi, Yirmiyah, you have Nevi'im. So he says a Navi who prophesies even one time in his life, even for a moment, he's a different human being after he prophesies. He's no longer the same person. Know why? Because the Ramchal writes, could you imagine a person has 1,000,000 volts, 1,000,000 watts of electricity going through him? The person would be fried to that. He'd be fried. You don't have a capacity to absorb that kind of electricity. L'avdel elef havdolos. When a prophet prophesizes, the human faculties are not in effect. Hashem connects to the neshama of that prophet. He communicates to the prophet through his soul. It's not through his intellect, his brain. To connect to the source of everything, the body doesn't have a capacity to tolerate that level of connection. A person should die immediately. Should die. Why doesn't he die? Because Hashem puts the person on life support. And that's the only reason why he's able to tolerate that level of communication. Because you're communicating, you're being attached to the totality of everything, which is Hashem himself. So therefore, the Ramchal writes that even if the prophet prophesies for a nanosecond, being touched at that level, automatically you're a different human being. Different human being. But only the prophet knows that. The communication is you're going to have children. The land is going to be given to them. But what's primary? It's the connection. He built him his back, Lashem and Elov. I'm just elucidating what the Avraham is saying to appreciate what we're speaking about here. First time I ever heard a share from Moshe Feinstein. I was 17 years old. It was a Shabbos I got to Russia. I was back from yeshiva. Came home. It was after the winter session. Come home for Pesach. Shabbos Agorah, Rav Moshe Feinstein was giving a Shabbos Agorah drasha. Rav Moshe Feinstein was such a Torah giant. Firstly, when he spoke in Yiddish, he spoke at a pace, unless you knew the subject matter, unless you knew what he was going to speak about, you couldn't even follow. Even if you had the capacity to understand, you couldn't follow the subject matter because he spoke so quickly. He spoke at a pace, the words just flowed out of his mouth. And he spoke for about an hour, 15 minutes. 45 minutes he spoke halacha, and half an hour he spoke agoda. The place was packed to the rafters, the Lower East Side, those years. A lot of Jews lived on the Lower East Side. That's where his yeshiva was. And 99% of the people, 99, maybe 9, did not understand what he was talking about. Did not understand. They weren't at a level to understand what he was talking about. Not only because of the speed of his words, but they didn't have the background to be able to even if he spoke slowly, they didn't even understood. So on the way back, after the Shabbos was over, everybody goes back to the shul to daven, and they meet people on the street and say, "We went Rav Moshe's Shabbos Rosh." They say, "No, you don't even know what you missed." These people didn't even know what he was talking about, but they were priding themselves that they were at the Shabbos Rosh. I mean, the Shabbos Rosh was to understand what he said. But what is it? I was there. You got people don't know what you missed. These people missed the boat themselves. But in terms of what they understood, have value, you don't even know what you missed. We merited to be there. Having children, having the land compared to Hashem communicating with you, not comparable. But if you have no appreciation for what it means to have that communication, you know what I just heard? I just won the lottery. Children, land. But that Hashem communicated, that what? You were estimating what the value is. Same idea. He removed himself from there and he traveled towards the mountain. Mikedim leVeisel, to the east of Veisel, Vayetolo, and he pitched his tent. Well, the word olo is normally spelled with a vav, not with a hey. Without the vowels, it would be read olo, which is feminine. He pitched her tent. Veisel miyom. Veisel is to the west. Va'ai mikedim, and I is to the east. Vayivasham mizbeach Hashem. He built a mizbeach for Hashem. Vayikrosham b'shem Hashem. And he called name Hashem, meaning he began outreach. That became his outreach center. The mizbeach was the focal point to do outreach. That's where he engaged with people. Rashi. Vayatik misham olo. Nitzis Beisel Marov, okay. Olo, Oloksiv. Without the vowels, if you read Olo in the feminine, Betrilo nota les oel ishto. Vakach es shalom. First he pitched his wife's tent, and then he pitched his own tent. You know, David HaMelech says in Tehillim, that the honor of a princess is Penima. She should be concealed. A woman has to have a different level of what? Of protection. Needs another level of accommodation in a man. Man could sleep outside. A woman, because she's a woman, she needs another level. So she needs her domicile, her residence has to be set in place before his. That's what Torah is teaching us.
Rabbi,
he sensed that location, his children, will be ensnared with the sin of Ochon. Those stories, the spoils of Yericho.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So he prayed then that the effect should be minimized. What was the effect? We lost 36. The next battle was Ai. There were 36 casualties in Ai. And the reason why we had the casualties was because Ochan had taken of the spoils of Yericho, which he wasn't permitted. Okay. When Yaakov believed that Yosef was mauled and killed by a predator animal, what did he do? It says he mourned, he grieved for 22 years, and he believed he was going to get him. Right? Rashi says that was the cause of his being in this depressed state, and he prophesied for 22 years because of this. Because he had a Masorah that if any one of his children die in his lifetime, he's going to get him. Now, what is Klal Yisrael? Klal Yisrael are 12 tribes. 11 tribes is not Klal Yisrael. You have to have 12. So if he did not merit that his children survive him, and they are to establish what a Klal Yisrael is 12, there is no Jewish people. If you remember, we mentioned Avraham Avinu over there, when Yosef came to look for his brothers, he thought they were in Shechem and they were in Dosa, another location. Gabriel says, Nosu Mizer. They traveled Mizer. So over there, the Avraham Avinu says, Zer is numerically 12. They broke the 12. They don't want to be associated with you. But if the 12 is not together, there's no Klal Yisrael. There is no Klal Yisrael. If Shimon and Levi would have been killed in Shechem, they were children. They were young. They were 13, 14 years old at the time. There's no Jewish people. Yericho, what happened over there, they were meant to conquer the land miraculously with no casualties. It was a whole different level of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who sinned? Ochan sinned, but because there's a concept of arevus, of communal responsibility, that's the reason why there were 36 casualties in Ai. Why was the Beis Hamikdash destroyed? Because the Jews sinned. They themselves deserved that level of punishment. So what is it going to go there? Here, it's to minimize the effect, the fallout for others. Yerushalayim is the Jews themselves failed. The vast majority of Jews failed. As a result of that, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. And that's how I would differentiate between each of these incidents and Yerushalayim. Person is divinely inspired. All of a sudden, you come upon an understanding, and you understand that level of clarity. Intellectually, is nothing comparable to that clarity, but it comes upon you. You're endowed with an understanding, which to you, it's more than life. It's more than seeing it in real time. When the person receives that, he knows this is a divine inspiration. It's not a communication. That's Ruach HaKodesh. Nevuah is, as I mentioned before, there's a direct communication. Hashem connects with the neshama of that person. It's a whole different level. And the only way, as I said, the only way you could tolerate or survive it, Hashem has to put you on life support. Otherwise, you would die. You would expire. There's no way you could survive that. That's the understanding. So the mitzvahs, all that was divine inspiration. He just knew it. How do you know it? No question. It's outside of his own capacity, but it wasn't a communication. So Hashem communicated the whole Torah's entirety to Avraham Avinu. And on that, he added rabbinic offenses, if tavshilin, or whatever else he added to it. Avraham, he traveled back and forth to the south. Rashi. He would dwell in one location for a month, go to another location. Lech he would say Yerushalayim. He would be traveling in the direction of Yerushalayim. Chichelko shel Yudo, shenotlo b'drom shel Eretz Yisrael, haramoria shinach loso. He had a sense. Avraham was able to sense that Yerushalayim is the holiest location. It's interesting. When Avraham was told, "Go to the land that I will show you," he didn't know where he was going, but he traveled to Canaan. What he traveled to Canaan, right? He knew what direction to travel. He didn't know what the destination would be. So the Ramban explains over there, it was known to Avraham Avinu that the holiest location is Canaan. That's the Holy Land. He had a sense. Where in the Holy Land, what part of that Holy Land is he going to receive? He had no idea. When he arrived, then he knew he was there. But in terms of when he left Haran to go, he knew he's not going to Africa. He's going to Eretz Yisrael. That's where he's going. The same idea. He had a sense, he knew Yerushalayim in that area, in that vicinity, that's the holy location. Exactly what part of that? Okay, when he arrives, he'll know. Okay, let's see the